Iaido is a form-based martial art that began in the first written recordings of the Iaido's history began in about the 17th century in Japan. By about 1600, the time of great civil war had ended, and so the primary occupation of the samurai was also at an end. They had no opponents, opposing armies, and enemies to have to battle and to defeat on the battlefield. So they were then compelled to take all of their teachings, all of their learnings, and everything that they had acquired in their wisdom and apply it to something different than an external opponent on the battlefield.
Hey. 2、
They reapplied these movements into something more philosophical. And so every martial art that ends in a do, Iaido, Aikido, Karate-do, has a philosophical input where the refinement is more within, using a physical realm to find that refinement on the inside. So Iaido is a martial art that comes from swordsmanship on the battlefield, repurposed in the modern day after 1600, for philosophical pursuits.
5、1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10.
Iaido, for me, has become a practice of trying to mirror myself in my imagination. I, at first, did not enjoy, but have come to appreciate how all of the things that I have elected not to like about myself, but yet would like to improve, is a manifestation in front of me in my imagination that I administer the Iaido techniques on for the purposes of refinement. For example, it's been a wonderful exercise to examine and eliminate what I consider bad habits, not just within Iaido, but bad habits in my interpersonal relationships, bad habits in things in my personality that I would like to change, have liked to change, and I have been rewarded in those changes. So Iaido for me is a pursuit of self-refinement. And going right back in, right? So for Suguri, static, no opponent, as we do normally as a Kihon, please just straight up and down, but with that mentality. Right back up, okay? Going back to the point that the engine of Suryaga here, I believe, is the left arm. Okay, great. Iaido for me began in 2004 when my teacher, who I was already a student of his in karate, and I was enamored by his style of teaching that I was very curious to understand and learn what else he taught to other students. And so I learned about Iaido solely through my researching more about my teacher, Marion Taylor. And it took him a while to be convinced that I would be a serious student in Iaido, but eventually I proved myself, and it was all downhill from there in 2004. I began because I was fascinated with another side of this amazing man's personality and what else the different face but of the same person would be able to provide. Iaido is a martial art that automatically, from the very beginning, commands a lot of responsibility and awareness of where you are in a space. Even as a beginner student, all students start right away with a practical sword, an Iai To, which is a modern-made sword, but is dulled so that the live edge and the characteristic cutting edge of the sword is removed, so that any beginner accidents that happen with the sword for students first beginning Iaido will be reduced. It's still fundamentally pointed, so you still have to be very careful with the tip of the sword and where it goes, where you are in a space. So if you are practicing with neighbors, needing to be concerned about how much space you take up. And in the realm of what makes a kata correct or incorrect, if you are making and taking up the correct amount of space to replicate a single kata. So for me, it has taught me a great amount of responsibility and how to handle a tradition that has begun, that has survived for centuries, that I hope through my fumbling hands can still move on to another generation.
4本目当たりと。
Iaido being a kata-based martial art, thriving only on the replication of form and not depending on the startled responses to another person, gives form and precision to things that we do every day. I like how it gives composure to me during times of panic, when maybe perhaps in the past I used to handle it with panic, but now this is a familiar situation, so now I know how to handle with composure. With the same mental attitudes and neural pathways that I handle Iaido kata, maybe I handle moments of immediacy in my life when I am not practicing Iaido, but to me it's the same pathway in my mind to achieve composure. Zanshin is a demonstration of exactly that composure that we were talking about before, that knowing how to be able to play pauses, kind of like in music. So how to be able to demonstrate composure and complete awareness, and if compelled to, hypothetically, going into a response immediately, because the mind is still very much awake during the body's slow movement. So almost like a snake that's coiled up, that if it kind of goes, if the head goes back into the center of its body, it's still always ready to move right back out into attack. This is one natural example I use to describe Zanshin in a very simple way. There's much more to it, but I think the visualization of a prepared snake in a coil ready to attack is a simple way to describe Zanshin. Mushin, as much as I've come to understand it so far, is a condition of the human being being able to demonstrate something of great skill that looks very complicated or masterful to someone seeing it for the first time, but to the person has been practiced so many times that it is just natural to them. as natural to most normal people to brush their teeth. Maybe to a master swordsman, it would be very natural to them to dispatch 5 imaginary opponents in a single second. Something like this incredible romance and how we perceive something to be very impressive, but that we don't even realize that in our own ways we demonstrate Mushin, not specifically, but what Mushin teaches us and how things to be natural, just depends on what the subject is. I would like to be able to practice Iaido and the curriculums of the kata that I've become familiar with, maybe one day without being exhausted by the end, so that it becomes as natural to me as taking the walk from my house all the way up the hill to Amherst and back down the hill to the post office and then back. For me now, that's an exhausting walk. But if I practice over years and years and years, it becomes more natural. So I would like to practice Iaido without becoming exhausted. For Iaido to become natural to me in another way, but not so physically. To be a normal condition of how I handle responsibility, that when something precious comes to me, if it's not in the shape of a sword, I would like to be able to recognize that. The sword is a very obvious object, so it commands a lot of respect to me as Iaido practice. Maybe there are other things that are not as obvious, but they could be just as precious as swords. I'd like to be able to handle those responsibilities with as much respect.